It's my honor to introduce you to Mick Ebeling.
Thank you. Hello. It is very, very nice to be here. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Terry. You guys live in an absolutely beautiful part of the world, so just the commute over here was tremendous. Everybody here in this town, we were talking about at lunch today, everybody here understands story because y'all know more about movies per capita, I think per population, than anybody. And we were talking about, I'm sure that everybody from all walks of life are like, that performance just wasn't as strong as his last performance, right? So everybody understands the concept of story. And everybody has probably understood or has heard the concept of sliding doors and kind of options and choices that you make. So the reason that I'm here today, kind of my story, my act one, if you will, started with this guy. And this guy's name is Tempt. And Tempt, in the 80s and 90s, was one of the foremost graffiti artists in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area. And we found out about him. We found out that he had ALS. And my production company is, as Sharon mentioned, we do a lot of stuff in technology, a lot of kind of graphics and animation work. We said, all right, well, this year, instead of giving a gift to our clients that they will forget about the second they open it, a bottle of wine, muffins, or some kind of silly ridiculousness like that, let's make a donation on behalf of them to a charity. So we said, let's do it to the Tempt One Foundation. He's a paralyzed graffiti artist. So we found, we got a hold of the brother and his father and sat down with them and said, hey, we've got some money and we want to give you some money. Sat across the table, old restaurant in downtown Los Angeles, and what are you going to do with the money? And his brother said, before I even kind of finished the sentence, I just want to talk to my brother again. I just want to be able to speak to him. And I said, well, wait a second. He's paralyzed. I get that, but I've never had anybody in my life who was in a wheelchair or who was had trapped-in syndrome. I just assumed, as I'm sure if you share my experience of not having that direct influence or direct contact with someone who's been paralyzed, that everybody had access to what I called a Stephen Hawking machine, right? That it was just a computer that you would talk to. And I said, well, what do you mean you want to talk to him? Don't you have a Stephen Hawking type machine? He said, no. I said, well, why? He says, well, because we don't have insurance and we don't have money, and they're $15,000. I said, well, then how do you talk to him? And he said, we talk with a piece of paper. And we hold up a piece of paper, we run our hand along it, and it has the alphabet on it. And when we get to a letter, he blinks, and we write that down. Start again. So the process of communicating with Tempt was excruciating. And his brother went on to say, if he blinks accidentally, if we don't do it the right way, it could throw everything off. And the nasty thing about ALS is that you're paralyzed as if you've broken your neck, but you still retain full sensory. So you can get cold, you can get hot, your leg can cramp, your neck can cramp. So just to say, you got a kink in your neck and you've kind of rolled off the pillow to the side, just to say, hey, can you adjust my neck is cramping. That could take an hour to say. And I said, well, that was ridiculous. I mean, and I heard some gasps here. You kind of have the same response, right? Like, that doesn't seem right. So I didn't know this about myself, but I have a process. And my process is that you commit, and then you figure out how the hell you're going to pull it off. And so I said, look, that's ridiculous. We're going to do two things. Forget this whole just give you money and walk out the door. We're going to get Tempt a Stephen Hawking machine so he can communicate again. And the next time there's an art benefit, which is kind of how we learned about him in the first place, the next time there's an art benefit, he's going to do the art. It's not just going to be his friends, he's going to do the art. And they said, really? I said, really? Really? Yes. High five, hug. We walked out the door and I was like, what the hell did I just do? I had never used these 3 words in a row in my life, ocular recognition technology. And basically, I had committed to doing that. So, I have another principle in my life. Surround yourself with people who make you feel stupid. If we're at dinner and you're the dumbest guy or gal at the table, in my book, you win. Because you get to pour that knowledge in your head. You get to learn. The guy who's waxing philosophical about algorithms or trompsing through Tanzania, you're learning, right? That's something that you're taking in. So what I did was I invited a bunch of people from all around the world, hackers and programmers from around the world. They descended upon my house. My wife and kids and I moved out of the house to we had a little kind of guest house in the back, and we just started hacking. And we just started working out, okay, what could we do and how could we make it so Temp could draw again? So we started to say, all right, well, the only thing he can move is his eyes and his eyelids, so let's use that. And so we started to think like, all right, well, how do we actually create something? So what if we map the surface of the eye, and came upon a bunch of different theories, and we ended up with this, and it was called the eye writer. And I live in Venice Beach, and the eye writer is basically cheap sunglasses from the Venice Beach boardwalk, cheaper coat hangers from my closet, some duct tape, and at the time, this is 2009, a web camera. And we cracked open the camera, mounted it to the front of the coat hanger so that it tracked your pupil. So conceptually, that was going to be the tip of the pencil.
Tempt is the ultimate graffiti artist.
He's put Los Angeles on the map.
He's always been next level.
He probably is the most versatile artist.
Tempt is an innovator.
People respect him. They know who he is. He's an OG.
He's such a force.
Nobody compares with his style. He's one of the top 5 in the world. Him being laid up, I don't think about that.
When you get diagnosed with ALS, it's a traumatizing experience because you're told you have only so long to live and you will spend your time completely trapped inside a body that doesn't move anymore.
I hate seeing him like that.
There's so many times where he could have just slipped away, but he's sticking it in there.
It's all about that one phone call that I almost did not pick up. Mick Ebeling was on the other end.
I had to be involved with Tempt and just helping him. I had no idea how I was going to come through on what I committed to.
Our writing culture was born of making something from nothing. I laid in bed, exploding with ideas that branched out from that initial concept. That's when I knew I wasn't done yet.
So this is what we ended up with at the end of those 2 weeks of beer and pasta and pancakes and beer. This is what the eye writer looked like. It's not pretty. It wasn't designed to be pretty. It was designed to be functional. It was designed to be cheap. The concept of what we wanted to do was, how do we create something and make it free? How do we make it so that everybody has access to this? Because what I was struck by in that conversation with his brother and father was, wait a second, he can't communicate because he doesn't have money? He can't communicate because he doesn't have insurance? That's not right. Someone's ability to express themselves and communicate shouldn't be regulated by their socioeconomic status. That's BS. So this is the device. That's what it looked like. And I will tell you right now, if Armageddon comes, you want duct tape and zip ties in your bag. You can do so many things with duct tape and zip ties. So we went to the hospital. We set it up for Tempt. We kicked his bed around so it was facing out the hospital room, down into the parking lot. We broke into a car dealership and had it hooked up a little generator, projected on the side of a really big wall. You kind of see it there in that last shot. We hooked up a wireless signal from his room down to the parking lot, and then Tempt drew in his room, and projected it on the wall. So we did graffiti again, but it was light graffiti for the first time in 7 years. And we were all downstairs. I invited my brother up from San Diego, and my kids were there, and all of his friends were there. And it was just, it was amazing. This guy who had had his art, his love taken away from him, had been given back to him. It was euphoria. And then we went home. That was it. There wasn't any preconceived notion of what we were going to do. We just wanted to help this one dude. There wasn't a grand plan. And then we, quote, woke up the next day. And it was Time Magazine's Top 50 Inventions of 2010. Gizmodo called it 8 incredible health inventions that transform lives. It's now part of the permanent collection at the MoMA. And we were like, what the hell did we just do? In my business, you work your whole career to have something take off like that. And this, we did on accident, it took off. And what it kind of started with me was this concept of like, something was impossible, and we made it possible. And, can we do this again? And should we do this again? Did we just, look, we stepped up and we drove it 300 yards. Do you just say, I'm done, and walk off the course and say, that's it? Or do you keep going? And we're kind of, I'm thinking about it, I'm talking about it. And then Temp sent us this, an email. And he said, that was the first time I'd drawn anything for 7 years. I feel like I'd been held underwater, and someone finally reached down and pulled my head up so I could take a breath. Kind of decided it right there whether or not we're going to keep doing it, right? How do you say, you see that and you're like, all right, we don't know what we did, but we got to figure out what it's going to be. So that was the start of this concept of non-impossible. How do you take things that are impossible and make them non-impossible? And for me, having played in this world of technology, it was, how do you take technology, but then how do you take technology and use it for the sake of humanity? So that started this kind of obsessive, and I think that's why I get along with Sharon so well. We're both completely obsessive about things and obsessing about what that means. And then the other part of it is that the concept of impossible. And this isn't preachy, this isn't anything, but the concept of impossible to the first person who comes up with something right now that wasn't impossible before it became possible. What? No, flying wasn't possible and then it became possible. No. It was, the answer is this. It's a safe bet. It's a fake 100 anyway, so I'm good anyway. Nothing. There's nothing that was nothing that is possible right now that wasn't impossible at one point. Nothing. Ready? Let's start. Lights, camera, computers, cell phones, clickers. Let's go back even further. How about woven clothes? Let's go back even further, depending on your religious belief, walking upright. Like everything was impossible until when? So statistically, I'm like, wait a second, this is interesting. I'm onto something here. I'm just looking at statistics. And a great example is this. Roger Bannister, if you look at the concept of impossible, there's also this kind of undercurrent of permission. And Roger Bannister was the first human being in all of recorded history. I'm sure there's some teachers here. They've been recording history for how long? Yeah, a couple years, right? A couple years. So in all of recorded history, nobody breaks the 4-minute mile that they can tell. He comes out, breaks the 4-minute mile in 1954, May 1954. You know what happens? So the concept of permission is baked into the concept of impossible. Once impossible becomes possible, possible gives permission for more impossible to take place. I'm like, all right, so we're onto something here. This is interesting. This is really interesting. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2 started on July 11th, 2013. I was out to dinner with a friend of mine. We were just shooting the bull, talking about different stuff. And he told me about this doctor named Dr. Tom, who was in an area in the Nuba Mountains. And because I was born in the United States, raised in the United States, educated in the United States, I had no idea where the Nuba Mountains were. We are geographically deficient in this country. And he was telling me about this guy. And so I was like, it was a great conversation and what a badass this guy was. And so I went home and I did what any self-respecting person with an internet connection did when they find out something interesting. They go home and they look him up. So I went home and opened up my computer. The first thing I come upon was an article by Alex Perry in Time magazine. It talks about Dr. Tom. It talks about this doctor. And he's this doctor in this area in the Nuba Mountains, which is this contested area between Sudan and South Sudan. And Dr. Tom is the only doctor within a 1,500-mile radius, and he does everything. He delivers babies. He performs appendectomies. He pulls teeth. He draws blood. He gives shots. There's only one doc, and he does everything. And he is just an absolute, I'm reading about this guy, and the war broke out, and he's a missionary doctor, and they said, hey, you got to get out of there. It's going to get hot. And he's like, missionary doctor? No, that's what I do. I don't leave when the going gets tough. I would have signed up for a family practice someplace. So he wouldn't leave. And I'm like, I like this guy. It's cool. I like this guy. So part of this war that's going on is the government of Sudan. By the way, Sudan, the same leader of Sudan, President Bashir, he's the guy that brought that thing called Darfur to the world. So what he does is he regularly runs these bombing missions on his own people in the Nuba Mountains, and he takes these big prop planes called Antonovs, and he runs them over these areas. You can hear them coming a mile away. There's these ancient Russian turboprop planes, and they roll 55-gallon drums filled with fuel and shrapnel, metal shards in them, and they hit the ground, and if you're in the way, it's a bad day. But there's foxholes everywhere, so you can get underground, so you miss these things. So I'm like, this story is blowing my mind right now. So at the end of this article that I'm reading in Time, it talks about Dr. Tom and this young boy named Daniel. And Daniel was out tending his family's herd, and he heard the Antonovs coming because you can hear them come miles away, and that just gives everybody time to scramble and get into the foxholes. And he was looking around, and he didn't have any place to go. So he went and he wrapped his arms around a tree to kind of protect himself. And the bomb went off not far from him. And the tree protected his body, but it blew off his arms. And so he made his way to Dr. Tom. Dr. Tom, it took him 8 hours to get there. Dr. Tom stitched him up, saved his life. And when he woke up, he looked at himself and said, if I could die, I would. Because now I'm going to be such a burden to my family. And context there, it's hard enough in Sudan to stay alive with all your limbs. It's hard enough to get enough food and water to stay alive. Now you take that away and it makes it even more difficult. But as I'm sitting there at the kitchen table after this dinner and I'm looking at my computer, down the hallway is where these three knuckleheads sleep. And I could not imagine those guys, any of these guys saying, God, I'm going to be such a pain in the ass to Dad. I wish I was dead. So for me, that was this. I was like, all right, don't know what, but I got to do something. So guess what happened next? People that make you feel stupid. Invite a bunch of people that make me feel stupid in my house. People that own 3D printing companies. People that are, scientists, physical therapists, doctors. We had written an article in our blog about a guy who had made a prosthetic hand out of 3D printing. We're like, okay, there it is. That's what we need. So we started experimenting. We started experimenting with 3D printers. We started experimenting with balsa wood. Different types of ways to make the articulation of the fingers and the knuckles. The guy who actually made the hand, he was a carpenter who accidentally cut off his fingers in South Africa. I went to the hospital and said, yeah, you can't fix my fingers, but can I get a prosthetic? They said, yeah, sure, that'll be $15,000, please. And he said, I'm an out of work, now fingerless carpenter. How am I supposed to afford $15,000? And he said, well, when you have it, come back. And he said, well, bugger that. I'm going to figure that out. So he went and actually printed and started making hands that were, the way that the fingers worked was actually through the wrist articulation. So we knew that, okay, there's something there. There's something there. So we brought him out as well. At the end of the weekend was a total and utter failure. We didn't have one thing that worked. It was so bad that we invited a girl over who had lost her arm, and she walked in, she had lost her right arm, and we had printed a left arm. So it was a parade of horribles, the whole thing. Now keep in mind, I'd already bought my ticket to Sudan. I'm going. It's happening. So Richard basically said, look, I can tell you got that look. So why don't you come on out Change your ticket. Instead of going straight to Sudan, why don't you swing through South Africa and let's get you fixed up. So I went to South Africa and started boot camp, Richard's boot camp. Spent 6 days sleeping on his floor, eating his food, and just learning different things about how he made his hand, and then expanding upon some of the things he was doing around arms and how we could do with arms. Learning how to 3D print. At that time, I never successfully 3D printed before because I had a team that was supposed to come with me to Sudan, and I was going to forever be the producer, right? The guy that orchestrates, okay, you go here, you go there. They all read all the articles about how gnarly it was over there and bailed out on me in 2 weeks before the trip. And I was like, oof. Talk about left holding the bag. Like, look, we can't cancel at this point. We had gotten Intel to get behind us. We'd gotten another company called Press Apart to get behind us. We're going. So when I got to Richard, didn't know how to print, never successfully 3D printed before, went through the process of all this, and he taught me everything he knew. After 6.5 days, probably grand total of 120 hours probably, we had successfully made one hand, one arm, said goodbye, and then hopped a plane. Hopped the plane from South Africa through Nairobi, from Nairobi to Juba, and then from Juba to Yida. And this is the runway in Yida. And this is what you land to when you land in the runway in Yida. Notice that's not like just a little Cessna that some weekend warrior crashed. That's someone who had probably hundreds, if not thousands of hours on their thing. So that was a little disconcerting. So we landed in Yida, and Yida was, I found out afterwards, what the commit that figured out also means don't research and then just go. So Yida was one of the most challenging refugee camps in the world, and this is what it looked like, so you can see. The plan was to go from landing, go straight over to the office, the diocese office that worked with Dr. Tom. I was going to meet Daniel for the first time, which was nervous. He was like, this is the kid, this is the whole thing is about him. It's called Project Daniel. Like, here we go. To meet him, pack up the trucks with the 3D printers, the laptops, the spools of plastic, the tools, the whatnot, and we were going to drive about 8 arduous hours under the cover of night with the protection of the SPLA, the Sudanese People's Liberation Army, which are kind of depending on what side of the border you're on, the rebels, to guarantee a safe passage up to Dr. Tom. So we get all set up, we pack up, I meet Danny, and then all of a sudden we're getting ready to drive away, and they come over and they say, hey, bad news. You can't go. I said, what, hang on, it's LA, it's Johannesburg, Nairobi, Juba, Yida, truck, we're ready to go. He said, nope. While you're in the air, the ceasefire ended. So now it's an active war zone out there and you can't go. And this is Park City, so you all know a lot of producers. I did what any self-respecting producer would do. It's just like, maybe you don't understand. Got some guys with cameras, and we've got this thing called Project Daniel, and Intel, and da-da-da. And we need to get up there. So can we just do that? And he's like, maybe you don't understand. There's live rounds going off out there, and you're not going. So they shut us down. So about an hour of wallowing, we said, all right, well, it looks like we're going to be setting up here while we kind of figure things out. So luckily, an NGO gave us a shed in the back, a shed/oven in the back of their facility. And we went over there and we just said, all right, let's get going. Let's start making arms. So we went over, we started to play. We started playing with the cast, the mold, with Daniel, started getting to know him, starting to play with kind of the articulation of how it would work. This is my second arm, so I'm nervous. You know, the adage measure twice, cut once. I'm measuring like 8 times and cutting once just to make sure I'm not messing it up. And then someone told me on the way out there, like, hey, just remember TIA. I'm like, what's TIA? TIA stands for This is Africa. I'm like, come on, I'm an optimist. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. Well, yeah. The electricity was wrong. Everything could go wrong. The electricity was wrong. Does anyone know how a 3D printer works here? The median age of this room, you have an excuse. You do. But I will tell you, and I'm not kidding, if you have kids and you lived in an era when the printing press came out and you had the opportunity to buy a printing press and put it in your house and blow your kid's mind, that's what a 3D printer is. And I'm not joking. You have, I have no stock in any 3D printing companies. This isn't a sales pitch at all. 3D printing is an absolute revolution, an industrial revolution in a box that ranges from about $3,000 down to about $600. If you have kids, get it, stick it in your kitchen, stick it in your study, stick it whatever, and just watch. Just watch what happens. The concept of I need something, let's make it, as opposed to I need something, let's go buy it, it's a pretty revolutionary way of thinking. End of speech on that one. So the way that it works is you've got a spool of plastic. It feeds into, you've got cold plastic, looks like spaghetti, feeds into an extruder. The extruder is heated to about 320 degrees Celsius. It heats the cold plastic into hot plastic, it looks like frosting, and then you have a grid system that moves like this, and it prints it over and over and over again in exact space or the exact coordinates that the program told it to. So if a pastry chef had absolutely precise writing skills and he wrote happy birthday, he would write H, 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 and the H would kind of grow from the bottom. That's 3D printing, right? For 3D printing to work, cold plastic has to stay cold before it goes into the hot. It was so damn hot where we were, it was melting to itself before it got into the extruder. So then we had to print at night. You print at night in Africa, and your printer gives off light. Guess what attracts? Yeah. So the next day, we're like, oh, this is easy. Temperatures have dropped by 15 degrees, no problem. We go in there, and prehistoric sized moths the size of my hand had dive bombed the printer and jammed up the printer. So it was just one thing after another after another. But this is what I woke up to every day. It was Daniel. Now everybody try to say this. Put yourself in my shoes and try to say this. I'm sorry, Daniel. We can't figure this out. The printer jammed, so we can't make you an arm, right? No, not an option. So we just kept going. And finally, after kind of storming our way through this and fighting our way through this, on November 11th, this happened.
There's this thing in me that loves to see things that are not supposed to be done. Daniel is just one of 50,000 amputees left in the wake of the bloodiest war Africa has ever known. We flew into an active war zone in Sudan with 3D printers, laptops, spools of plastic, and the goal to build Daniel an arm.
You ready?
The concept of Project Daniel was hatched on July 11th. And on November 11th, Daniel fed himself for the first time in 2 years. But it's never about just one person. If we could teach the locals to do it themselves, then Project Daniel could live on long after we left. And it did.
Thank you. So the crazy thing of that part where Daniel had that ace bandage and was throwing it was a total accident. Everybody stick your hand out in front of you like this. So the way that the arm works, there's nothing automated. There's nothing digital about it whatsoever. It's all strings. So imagine you have guitar strings that run from the tip of your finger down across your palm around to your elbow, where there's a little fulcrum point there. It goes through a little loophole, and it goes to the back of your bicep. Now take your hand. Now you remember your fingers now, these are digits, so they're hinged, right? But they're straight right now, because the way that it works is these are on rubber bands so that when it's not clenched, it's straight. So now go like this, bend your arm. What happens to your fingers? Well, you can't, if these were rigid and this was guitar strings, you couldn't bend it because it's rigid. So something has to give. So you go like that and the fingers close. So the act of picking things up are just pulling on the guitar strings. So it's simple geometry, actually. So you go like this, it closes, you go like this, it opens. Ready? So it took Daniel maybe 13 seconds to figure this out once he got it. There's the ace bandage, you go over to it, you bend your arm like this, now your fingers are closed on it. All right? Any San Francisco Giants fans in here? Ready? Look at my arm. Just watch the shape of my arm. Ready? It's bent, it's bent, it's bent, it's bent, it's bent. It's straight. We lucked out. It's the perfect motion of throwing. Your fingers release here. So he did that 3 or 4 times, and Dr. Tom and I looked at each other, I'm like, do we have some kind of like Joe Montana prodigy on our hands right now? Like, what's going on? And we're like, no, I guess that's the way the thing is designed. So that's Project Daniel. And part of it was to go back into, as you kind of saw at the end of the video, it wasn't just to go out and be, any South Park fans in here? So if you haven't seen this episode, and you just know the concept of South Park, you know what I'm about to say. We didn't want to be Sally Struthers. And the Sally Struthers, there's an amazing episode on South Park where Sally Struthers flies in, has champagne, takes pictures next to a couple starving African kids, hops back in the plane and flies away. That wasn't our goal, right? Our goal was to teach a man a fish as opposed to just give a man a fish. So we got there, and our whole plan was, and no disrespect to Sally Struthers, it was more about the South Park episode. The goal was to teach them so that they could actually do it themselves. And when we got on the plane to come back, I had made an arm for Daniel, and we broke the crew into 2 teams of 4 and 3, and I taught them how to each make an arm, but it was with the teacher. And if there's teachers here, you know, it's if you're hawking over somebody and they're about to, and they can change it. So they did it supervised, but they made those 2 arms. So that last shot where they're kind of fist bumping, those are 2 arms that the kids made with me supervising. So I was psyched because I had taught them, but I was like, oh man, are they gonna be able to do this when I leave the room, when I leave the building, when I leave the country? And those pictures at the end were sent to me when I landed in Los Angeles. I opened up my phone and Dr. Tom said, hey, I hope the flight back wasn't too bad, but while you're in the air, the guys made these 2 arms. And so I'm walking through LAX just like, woo, cheering, and it was awesome. So when I started Non-Impossible, I started it as a foundation. And I started as a foundation, and I used to joke with my friends that I was getting carpal tunnels from shaking the tin cup, going around asking people for money. I was like, there's gotta be a different way to keep doing this. I'm spending more of my time asking for money, not enough of my time actually doing it. And this quote is a quote that I love by Buckminster Fuller, which is, you don't change things by fighting the existing reality, right? If I wanted to change this podium, I could do something with it, but there's so many parts of this podium that are gonna still retain some of the form that it already has, right? But you gotta change, you have to start something. If you wanna do something new, you gotta build a new model that makes the existing model completely obsolete. You gotta start anew. So for me, this goal was to, let's get corporations. Let's do this. Non-Impossible is now a for-profit venture. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the work that I do in media and commercials, and I'm gonna go to corporations and I'm gonna say, listen, you guys spend gazillions of dollars every year. Let me tell a story for you. You can take that story and promote it as an Intel piece or whatever piece, but then instead of just going out and telling a funny commercial with Jerry Seinfeld or something like that, or just something to you throw away, I'll make an invention that can make the world a better place, and you get to kind of take a little bit of ownership of that. How about that? And so that's what we started to do. So we did that. We did that for Intel, and we came back and we entered it into all the, we kind of started to put it out there. And I don't know if there's anybody here in media, but within 14 weeks with 0 paid media, we had 420 million earned media impressions. It just went, it blew up. And then, again, in the media space, all of a sudden it started to get all this press and started to get all these awards and blah, blah, all these great things, and that was fantastic. And we went to Cannes, which is kind of the grand poobah of all of these things, and we won the highest award there called the Titanium Lion. And this was all fantastic, but keep in mind, while I was sitting there interviewing Dr. Tom and bombs were going off in the future, I wasn't thinking about what color tie I was gonna wear to the award ceremony. This was about what we can actually do. But having these awards, having these things that proved that what we were doing had some commercial viability to it, made it so we didn't have to rattle the tin cup anymore. And what it proved in this concept of doing good And you've probably heard this, but that's what I aim to do in everything that I'm doing right now and everything Not Impossible, is that doing good is good business and doing good is good branding. And if you own a business, statistically, especially with some of the big companies, studies show that people will purchase things based on their perception of whether a company is doing good. Not even the actuality. Their perception of whether a company is doing good. So you want to sell more widgets? Do some good. That's kind of what we're preaching to these people. And it also showed me the power of the story. Because what we did was amazing, but we told an amazing story. We shot it well, we edited it well, we promoted it well, we got it out there. And I was talking about this at lunch today. If a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, in my opinion, it does not make a sound. You got to get it out there. And our whole point is we never sought, and we don't seek to be prosthetic makers. That's not our goal in any way, shape, or form. We didn't seek to be ocular recognition device manufacturers. What we seek to be is people that show that if this big dumb bald guy can do it, you sure as hell can do it too. I never printed before and we did it. So what can you do if you've printed once more? You're already more qualified, right? You're already more qualified if you can print. It's about starting this philosophy of doing good and telling a story about it and telling more people about it. And so that's kind of what we're doing, this story. The book is a way to do that. We have a blog called Not Impossible Now where you can go on and you can just see stories of other people that for us, this is us. This is like recruiting for us. We tell the stories of these amazing scientists and mad scientists and hackers and programmers and weekend warriors. They're just making really cool stuff that we get and go, wait a second, there was that guy and that girl and that, whoop, we got another solution. And then we can go do some good with it. So that's what we do with Not Impossible Now. And so the question that I would ask everybody here today is, what's your story? What's the story that you want to tell? And our philosophy around storytelling is based on this mantra of, if I ask you right now, there's somebody, or do you want to help me solve hunger in the United States? The answer is probably, yeah, sure. Back of the head, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do that. But yeah, I'm in. Now if I go, there's a dude outside right now who's hungry, hasn't eaten for a day. You want to go help me feed him? Everybody hears, yeah, let's do it, right? So what we've tried to do is create this singularity of focus. And what that's called for us is help one, help many. And that goes for how you help people. We told the story of Tempt, one person, but now we got an email from these people. It was actually one of the funnier emails I ever got. On December 13th in 2011, I know that, and it was 5:34 in the morning. And I woke up, I get up really early, and I see this email, and it was from Korea, from the Samsung programmers, and they're like, and if you've ever worked in Korea or things like that, I love this. It's complete. It was perfect. It fit every perfect stereotype, and I loved it. Oh, Mr. Ebeling, we saw your TED Talk. You're so brilliant, and we admire you, and we think you're brilliant, and we saw your iWriter, and you're brilliant, and I'm like, uh-oh, here it comes. And at the end, we took what you did, and we basically kicked your ass and made it better. But you're brilliant, and da-da-da-da. And I was like, perfect. We don't want to create ocular recognition devices. We want to do that, publish it open source, and then let everybody else go and make it better. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. So this concept of help one, help many is help one, tell one story that has the ability then to help many, many people afterwards. And so the question that I would want to leave you guys with today, and just to think about, ruminate on it, pray on it, think about it, sleep on it, is who is your one? Who is your one? And to take it down even further, who is your Daniel? Thank you, guys. Thank you.
So I'm going to say two things, and then we're going to open this up for Q&A. We went to student outreach today, and what a better guy to bring to student outreach. And we gave the kids a piece of paper and said, what do you think is impossible that you would like to have be possible? And don't you want to know what the students think? These are young, brilliant kids from Park City. How about this idea? Invisibility. Teleportation. 5 people said cure for cancer. 2 kids want to live to be over 200 years old. 2 kids want to live to be over 200 years old. Let's ask that question in about 8 years and see what they say. Another one was 2 people said they'd like to have contacts with screening abilities so that they can watch things, or sort of like the Google Glass, only with the lens. We're getting there, right? And this one was interesting. A way to make prosthetics move from just thinking, which leads into 2 things I have for Mick. Number 1, can you do that? And then could you tell us about what your next best thing is,
Sure.
your next big thing is?
Sure. Well, on the prosthetics thing, it's actually, there's kind of a dip in the story when it comes to Tempt. Tempt has now lost his ability to fast blink or to blink. So his ability to draw was now taken away by the disease because he wasn't able to do this anymore. So he had it ripped away from him. It was given back to him, and it was ripped away again. So we were like, no way. We're not going to roll over. So we started to look at different ways to basically replace the blinking. And we started to develop this a couple years ago. And we've replaced blinking with thinking. And so we have a thing called the Brain Writer that is basically, it's what it sounds like on the box. It's replacing the act of blinking and using your eyes with the act of thinking. And the wonderful thing about that is, back to that whole thing about, impossible becoming possible. Every day that goes by, kind of in the theory of Moore's law, EEG technology is coming down in price and becoming more and more accessible. In fact, I have a toy for my kids called the Force Trainer that you can buy on Amazon that is a little fan with a tube in it and a ping pong ball. Then you put on this thing, your kids put on this thing, then you turn it on, and how hard they think spins the fan and kind of levitates the ping pong ball. So it's actually, there's toys out there that are doing things like that. Yep. And the kids, my kids kicked my butt on doing it. Like I was sitting there thinking about it and I couldn't get it to do it. And they were like, "What's wrong, Dad?" They put it on. It's like balancing right around the middle. Yeah. So that's something that the Brain Writer. To that point, that's something that's becoming more and more accessible.
Right. And I think we introduced Mick. We have a couple of people within our network too that have the iBrain. Dr. Philip Lowe has created the iBrain, and there's another filmmaker who. If anybody's a Fire Films team member here, you've already seen this, the Love Competition has a portable EEG that we've introduced Mick to, so that's a low-cost piece of equipment that you can use to help with that as well. It's fun.
Yeah, and you're going to see, future in review, you're going to see, new era hats. In the brim of the hat, you'll start to see just like basic EEG sensors coming up in the near future. And it's not going to be, churn on car. But it certainly could be, you think text, and then your text messages pop up. Or you could think, it's kind of binary things, like it's commands as opposed to, my dearest love. Type these whole things.
So let's open it up for Q&A.
What's next?
You didn't do the what's next.
No, I didn't do the what's next. The what's next, this is actually super exciting. So Project Daniel took off and went gangbusters. And I was invited out to Mexico City to tour a pediatric rehabilitation hospital. And so I went out to the hospital and got this incredible tour, and I showed up, and I showed up at noon, and by noon this hospital had already seen, it's an outpatient rehabilitation hospital, they'd already seen 1,200 kids by noon. And they have 22 of these facilities all throughout Mexico. And it was this incredible place. And then the last room that they took me to, there was this. You go back to the screen. There was this, and they knew kind of my infatuation with technology, and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing! What is that?" And they said, "Well, this is a little girl with cerebral palsy, and she's never walked before. So what they do is they put her on a treadmill, and they hang her from straps, and they put these robots on her legs, and it's basically like jumping a car engine, right? You know, typically the battery sends the signal to the spark, That's the way I walk right now. My brain sends that signal down to my legs, and then I walk like this. And what this is doing is it's sending the signal from the legs back up to the brain. And so I said, that's amazing. Tell me more about it. And they said, if a child uses this, they can walk within a year. And if they don't, and I said, all right, well, what if they don't use this? They might never walk, or it's kind of like the classic parallel bars, like this type of thing, and it could take 5 years or never. So there's 1,200 kids by noon, and there's one of these things here. So what's kind of the first question that comes to mind? Why don't you have like walls of these things? This should be like an arcade for these things. These kids just look queued up like Space Mountain in Disneyland. And he said, we'd love to, but they're $500,000 each. I get to use the laser pointer. Treadmill, eBay, $300. Climbing straps from REI, $40. Robotics, as hard as I tried, I could not get that thing up to it. So kind of in the spirit of the Priceless commercial, I couldn't get it up to what it needed to be. So in the back of my head, that whole commit and figure it out, it was like good angel, bad angel. The bad angels go, just do it, commit. And the good angel's like, dude, be careful on this one. And I was like, let's say I could cut that price down by under a fifth of the, and I didn't get the words out, and he said, I'll buy 20 of them from you right now. And I went, be right back. So, all right, so help me out here. What did I do? Went back, and then who did I invite? A bunch of people that make me feel stupid. Set up a room, a lot of people with PhDs and all these people, and we sat around, a bunch of adults, and my friend had said to me, hey, if you ever do one of your little powwow thingies again, let me know, because I'd love my son to go and be present there. He's a programmer, and he just would love to see it. And I've known Joel since he was a baby. I said, yeah, sure. So Joel came, and he had his shirt tucked in, and he was all looking proper. And at the end, we started to hypothesize about different ways that we could do it, and we were talking about possibly getting it off the treadmill and actually putting it on zip lines so that the person could actually get that physical and mental and emotional response of actually moving forward and not synthesized motion. And we're like, oh, that's cool. And so we're like, all right, well, I mean, great stuff. And we came up with an action plan, and Joel kind of raised his hand in the back and said, and I was like, yeah, Joel? He said, do you guys mind if I share something? And we were like, sure, Joel. He's so cute. Go ahead. And he said, well, the zipline thing is cool, but what if we took them off the line, and what if we actually embedded, a low-cost but powerful enough gyroscope in the, kind of the spinal area of the exoskeleton, and we just spun that up high, and so that would keep them from falling over. But we created an algorithm that worked with the muscle inflex against that, and as that grew and got stronger, that would spin the gyroscope down. So essentially, as their legs grew stronger, the gyroscope would spin down to nothing, and they'd be walking on their own. And literally, it was like this. Those are all the jaws hitting the table of all the adults. And I was like, shut up, Joel, go get me some more sushi or something. So fast forward to this week. This week, we will announce, hopefully this week or the weeks to come, we will announce the corporate sponsor that is getting behind Walk Not Impossible, and that is a exoskeleton device that will help kids with cerebral palsy walk again. Our goal is to have 1,000 kids walk in the next 3 years, and the punchline is it's being developed by the Granada Hills High School robotics team. That's Joel right there. And that really just kind of proves that, and I said this today at the school, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how much hair you have, it doesn't matter what sex, creed, color, shape, size, it just matters if you want to do something. And it truly, I'm really, really excited about this thing in terms of what we're going to be able to cause and create. So that's the next big thing. There's a bunch of other things, but that's kind of the thing that's going to be coming out most recent.
Great. Okay, questions? Ready?
Yeah.
How about the possibility of producing 3D printers using bioorganic material rather than plastic?
Already being done. Already being done. Now, if you really want to piss me off, they're printing organs, they're printing all kinds of things, they're printing carbon. Can someone just print me a meniscus? I just want a meniscus. That's all I want. And you can change it every 3 months for all I care. I just want a meniscus. But yeah, they're already printing with that kind of stuff, and it's incredible. There's actually a great TED Talk about a kid who they 3D printed, I believe it was a kidney, and he's alive to this day to talk about it.
Up there?
Yeah.
Did MakerBot sponsor the Project Daniel?
No, they did not. They tried to take credit for it after it was done, though.
Anybody else? Right here?
Yeah.
Other than having an amazing idea, could you give us any tricks or rules of thumb for getting the story out successfully?
I wish there was a prescription for that, but I think it's look at ways to get stories out. You know, if we're launching a story in the next couple weeks as well that is really cool. I know for a fact it doesn't have kind of the emotional resonance of a Project Daniel, so it's kind of knowing how big the caliber of the story, the caliber of the bullet you're putting in there to kind of shoot out there. So it's kind of understanding it and then pointing it in the right direction. The story that we're going to release, I think it'll have less public appeal, but we're going to focus it really hard on organizations that can benefit from it, you know, like ALS and MS and any kind of, total paralysis, because that's what the device is going to be for. So I think it's a matter of being really focused on it. I knew that Project Daniel had a mainstream appeal to it. I knew that Robot Walker is going to have a mainstream appeal to it. Certain things are going to be more laser focused towards different things. But
anybody?
How big did Project Daniel get? From 3 arms to how many?
So when we launched, I came back right before Thanksgiving in 2014. We launched, or 2013. We launched it January 6, 2014. And by the time we launched it, they were making about an arm a week, and I wanted them to do about 1 or 2 arms a month was my goal. Then the Civil War broke out, and a lot of the people at the hospital either left or had to go fight. And that was actually, I would say, one of the biggest learning experiences from that, and we'll never make this mistake again, is that we now have a mandate that when we go in to teach technology, because we always want to teach and then leave, 50% of the people we teach will always be women, because women don't leave. And there's a TED Talk about it. There's all kinds of things about this, but women stay with the tribe, women stay with the family, women stay with the town. Men learn a new technology and run off to the big city and try to make money with it, or they get enlisted, or they die, or whatever. So for us, it's purely kind of a statistical thing of creating longevity around our initiatives. So production went way down, and now it's starting to come back up again. But we had 7 or 8 people, and now we have 2. And those guys are actually Dr. Tom's assistants, so they just have less time. But the thing that gets me really excited is if you go online and you do go to CNN and just do a survey or a search for 3D printed prosthetics, they're everywhere. There's a group called Enable, and that's all they want to do is that. And there's this group and that group and this group, and so it's becoming more and more prevalent. And for us, it's kind of like that story about Korea. I hope that the Daniel arm is already somewhat becoming obsolete, and it hasn't even been just barely over a year. And that's the whole point. We want the theory of open source, and this is actually a great lesson, that one of the theories of open source is you release early and you release often. Corporate America would say you come up with an idea, you schedule a conference call, and you have a meeting, then you come up with a prototype, you test that prototype, you schedule another conference call, Jim got sick, so you got to reschedule that conference call. So your arc of product development is kind of this long, slow arc. In the open source mentality, it's like this. And you go ahead and you put stuff out there that's not polished and not pretty, then people make it better. So by the time this arc gets to this point, you've had 20 different dev cycles in there.
Yeah. How many teachers have you discovered that would accept your attitude in a classroom? I taught for 36 years. It would have been a tough thing to do. I'm not teaching science fiction. Do as I say and read chapter 7.
Right. I haven't gone into schools yet, and I think the thing that I love that you're seeing a resurgence right now in the schools is shop classes coming back. shop classes back in force. And I don't know how to weld. I want to learn. I'm going to take a welding class. You know what I mean? If Armageddon comes, I want to know how to weld, not how to do long division.
You keep on mentioning Armageddon.
Yeah.
We have one up here.
We have the one with the mic, so if we could go with the mic, it would be good to questions then.
Can you do a beatbox really quick?
No, that's not me. I just wondered, there's a lot of research that shows if you have the ability to look at a problem with the eyes or mind of a child, that you can get a lot more creative. And I wondered if your experience with Joel might make you include more young minds in the future in that group that comes to dinner.
Absolutely. There's a chapter in the book called The 3 Rules of How, and the third rule is beautiful, limitless naivety. And if we, especially as old, cranky, crusty adults, can adopt some of that naivety, I think we open up our own minds for innovation and possibility. There was a study, I think it was in Utah, University of Utah, that the average 2-year-old hears the word no 200 times a day. Now, how many times do we hear no as adults that isn't verbal? Stop signs, red lights, brake lights, no right turns, no left turns, speed limits. It's like we're constantly reinforced by what we can't do. You don't have that thinking when you're a kid, so I think there's a healthy way. I literally, for better or for worse, I've told my kids, I'm like, just don't get caught. Just don't get caught. If you get caught, you're going to get in trouble. If you don't get caught, how do you get in trouble? And I'm a firstborn, he's a firstborn. The firstborn will never do that. He will always go by the book. Second one, middle, third one, I'm going to hopefully tell him, don't break the rules, because he's going to break every rule under the sun. Yeah.
So I was just curious, you seem like a grassroots kind of anti-big institutional corporation guy. What are your education goals for your own children? Is it MIT, Ivy League, or they're complete failures, or what's your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. So we set up trust funds, where we kind of make payments, or I don't know what the 401k equivalent is for putting money in for your kid's college education. And so for our first kid, who's 11, now he turns 11 in a couple weeks, it's in our will if we die or he gets it if he goes to school. And then we were like, wait a second, that's ridiculous. It's at a certain point you do whatever you want to with the money, right? And so we were making these deposits so that if they have an idea, go. If you lose it, good. You learn how to fight back up. And so I think that I hope they go to school. Honestly, I went to the Air Force Academy and I took 11 or 10 classes a semester versus I left the Air Force Academy after 2 years. I was proudly serving my country playing basketball for the United States Air Force basketball team. And I left to go proudly serve my country playing for the University of California, Santa Barbara volleyball team, which is a different type of service. And I was taking like 3 classes a quarter, right? I learned more at Santa Barbara, social skills, working with people, how to get pretty girls to help you with your homework, honestly, I think that college for me is way more of just the people interaction skills and then choosing kind of what you're passionate about. So that's my theory on education.
Right back here.
Yep.
Very inspiring work.
You got a beatbox.
Yes. Thank you for the talk. You touched briefly on corporations and causes and how it went viral for your case. I mean, is it something that you had to push hard, or are corporations opening up more in terms of participating in this kind of work?
Well, I mean, that's why I'm so psyched that Project Daniel was so awarded and that we received all the awards that we did. There's this great scene, it's in Austin Powers' film, where Austin Powers is arguing with Steven Spielberg. You guys know that scene? And he's like, "No, Steven, I really don't see it that way. I think we should take this thing." And Steven goes like this. It's funny because Oscar seems to think that I have the right opinion on this one. And winning all those awards is kind of our little mini version of that we can say to corporations, listen, we won the Titanium Lion, we won Best of Show at the One Show, and this and that, and all these accolades. We had 420 million earned media impressions in 14 weeks with 0 paid media. I can pop those off to marketers, and they're like, give me some, give me some, give me some. So the more we do it, the easier it'll be to have that ability to walk in and do it. And I think we're setting that up. We're setting that up. It's fun still to have those conversations with people and corporations, and they're like, okay, so like we had a conversation. I sat in the car. We went out to lunch, and I sat in the car for 2 hours having a conversation while everybody was inside eating. And the whole conversation was about IP. And typically, the company that pays you retains the IP. And I was like, listen, I know this is crazy, but you need to give us the money. You retain 0 IP. You retain 0 control. But it's going to be good for you. And they're like, okay, and they roll up their sleeve and get ready, you know. And so, but that's going to be, I think that'll become easier and easier as we go along.
Okay, we have 2 more. One right here.
So I'm intrigued by what you learned in the Sudan about involving women. So I'm looking at this picture. So what if you said, you each have to go get a young woman to be your teammate in this, and what is your thought about in the United States, making sure everything you're working on involves 50% girls or women?
Absolutely. Those are just friends that recruit. I also believe in self-recruitment, and these guys recruited each other, and these guys spent every night in their garage. That's the back of the garage right there. So yeah, I probably should have told them, like, hey, you know, guys, go get some. Knowing these guys, they would have been like, oh. But yeah, we probably should have done that.
Okay, and then here's last one.
Last one. Come on, let's keep going. Sharon?
Do you want to keep on going?
Yeah, let's keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. So one of the things that you did was you shared going from a good idea and some of the challenges in order to make that a reality, then make it into large production and so forth. That's exactly what Quirky does. Have you looked at the Quirky model for doing this? Well, we've got an idea. Now let's throw it out to crowdsource the engineering, the design, the manufacturing, and dramatically reduce cycle times.
Yeah, I toured Quirky's office. I love the concept of Quirky. We are absolutely step and step, and we deviate at a certain point, and it's not right or wrong. They take the idea, they take it to a certain point, and then they go, thank you, and then they take it and they mass produce it, and they do a rev share deal with the person who came up with the original idea. Ours, we put it open source. Arguments can be made for both, that they're actually able to take it to I actually learned a lot from Quirky because with the iWriter, we were like, open source, you know, like that can be only one. That was our only opinion. And people would come to us and say, can you make an iWriter? And we're like, no, you must make it yourself. And we realized that's not the point. The point is accessibility. And ready? Everybody in here has someone who needs an iWriter. I give you the manuscripts. I give you everything you need in terms of where to go, buy the materials, do it all yourself. Option 1, do it yourself. Option 2 is click buy it now, and it shows up on your doorstep for $250. How many would click option 2? How many would choose option 2? Yeah, guess what? Me too. I got 3 kids. I got to go to lacrosse practice. I don't have time right now. So what we kind of realized was offering both options is probably a better choice, and that's going to kind of affect what we're going to do. With the robot walker, we're going to probably do both. We're going to try to mass manufacture it so that we can actually just get it into the marketplace and kids can walk, but we're also going to try to make it simple enough that we want people to try to rip it off as well.
Up back there?
You have to beatbox.
You have to.
Come on. You beatbox. Got to beatbox.
The mic is over here.
Oh, well then you got to beatbox loud.
But I'll give it up for him if he wants it.
I saw his hand go up. So.
He's been going
I'm
like
like,
this.
wow, you sound different.
I'll bring it up there next.
Okay.
So I work in ads and I work in tech in San Francisco.
You work what?
I work in ads and I work in tech in San Francisco. So I get the corporate sponsors for marketing. Curious, and you may have already answered my question, but do you have a desire to partner with big tech companies? They do a lot of this work, or do they want ownership then? And do they want to? Is the timeline too long?
Intel was a big tech company, and they got it.
Because I think about like the Apple, the Google, the Facebook.
It's going to be whether or not it's going to be the door that I go in, and they have to see it as we're not going to own the IP, and that's going to be one of those things where I think the Googles and the Apples are going to be like, no, sit down, small fry, we own the IP, and I'm like, okay, well, you just. Come talk to us in a little bit. We're going to keep doing what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of that's the pitch that I say to these people is like, listen, you wouldn't retain the IP for doing an ad about Seinfeld. There's no IP there. So just let me, my cast, if you will, my actors are these inventions that we're making that are actually at the end of our shoots, at the end of our productions, instead of some stale bagels and some, shirts that we can't return to wardrobe, you have a device that helps a kid feed himself for the first time in 2 years. Like, just take that. Like, we're giving that to you as a story. Take the story and amplify it. Don't worry about this whole ownership thing. And it's not an easy pitch, but the more we do it, the more it'll happen. Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you on an ad. When you say you work in ads, what do you do?
I work for Google.
Oh, okay. So I'll tell you right now. Ad tech. Like, look, I came back from the Sudan, and every time I opened up my computer, that's funny. There's an ad for MakerBot printer on my thing. I'm like, geez Louise, right? I believe that, to my core, that all the technology that exists in the world right now is all we need to solve the majority of the world's problems. It's just a question of, I'm going to take a little bit here and a little bit here and a little bit here and mix it up and maybe do a little bit of original stuff, and then we got something special. So I've spoken at a couple ad conferences where it's all about, we can deliver the most perfect ads to the mobile this, and we can do this, and we can do that, and it's all about profiling. And I had a conversation with a couple of them, and I said, what if I came to you and said, I don't want anything of your code or your algorithms that actually would cannibalize how you make money. But what if we could take the core of what you're doing and use it so that we could find people that need help, or that need something, or that might be cancer patients that are underserved, or whatever. But you keep everything that makes you money, but just loan us that code. And they're like, interesting. So I'm kind of keep pushing that down that path, because profile away, go for it. If we can take it and use it towards something good, then I won't be pissed that I see MakerBot ads every time I open up my web browser.
2. Okay, so we've got one back here.
All right, hit it, buddy. Woo! Wait, was that your brother or was that you?
Do you think it would be possible to start making circuits with 3D printers?
Making circuits with 3D printers. They're making houses with 3D printers. They're making organs with 3D printers. They're making things right now that have different filament colors so that you can program it so that whatever comes out, your cup, could be a blue cup with red writing and a yellow handle, right? So if that's just color right now, what's to say that we can't do it so there's organic materials here and plastic here and wire there? So I think ultimately 3D printing is the new printing press. It's the new everything, and it's the magic box that can kind of make whatever we want. And now to get a little bit of, theoretical, think about the political structure. How does our government stay in business? How does our government pave the roads? How does our government pay for public service? By taxes, right? And you tax all the way along. If I don't have to go to Home Depot anymore because I can just print the parts that I need, I've cut a lot of taxes out along the way. So you're talking, I think you're going to see in the future a potential, this isn't to you, by the way. I'm waxing philosophical to the boring adults right now. You're talking about a pretty cataclysmic shift in terms of just kind of the revenue system of how our government and how our life works.
And is there one more, and then we'll close? Oh,
Right
another
next there.
young man. Okay.
Would it be possible for a kid to
Yes.
get the tools, the technology needed to make something like you've made?
Yeah. Go on to, I'll give you the website to go. Go on to, MakerBot has a great site called Thingiverse, and you can go on and search Thingiverse. I actually don't like the Thingiverse search functionality. Like when I say I want a red printed iPhone case with a Lego back, it delivers me like a yellow flying monkey. It's like they need to work on that, but you can go and you can search for things and you can do that.
And we're going to do one
And
more.
you're also seeing right now, and this is where I get really excited, is you can go, like the 3D modeling applications are getting easier and easier and easier so that you can make things. And scanning technologies, HP is coming out with a thing called the Sprout, which is kind of has a built-in gestural recognition device on it, which just means it tracks your hand, kind of like, remember Minority Report with Tom Cruise? When he was kind of doing that? Yeah. That's happening all over the place now. That was the future. Film predicts the future a lot of times. You're going to see just easy modeling. Like you're going to want to make a hand, you can go whoop, and then it gives you a model, and then you can hit print. So that's going to get easier and easier. Okay, 5 more questions, then we're done.
We have
5 more questions, that's it. I'm being serious. No more than 5 more questions. Okay.
I understand the prosthetic device in the context of TIA, but if we're going to try to do this in the United States, what do you do about the FDA, which consumes maybe 80% of the money that goes into every medical device ends up with compliance issues, not the making it. The Maker Society seems to work great TIA, but what do you do in the U.S.?
Lots of initials in that question, right? How do you fight what you can't find? How do you sue what you can't pinpoint? So the FDA is essentially, I think it's at its core probably really wants to do good. But there was a report that came out, I don't know, a year or so ago, where the FDA, it was like a statement, it was an actual statement that said, the FDA is adopting a new policy where they're actually going to listen to consumer advocacy groups, or not advocacy groups, consumers in terms of recommendations on things that they think should be approved. Wow, thank you. That's a great idea. We're not a company that wants to get into medical devices. We're probably going to piss a lot of medical device companies off. But if my son needs something, I don't give a squirt of you-know-what if I'm breaching somebody's blah blah to make my son or somebody else something. So I think that right now it's why this 3D printer is so important and why Shop is so important and why this is so important. I feel that we have an opportunity to extract ourselves from this sense of dependency and be able to be more self-reliant. And once we do that, then I think you're talking about a pretty big shift in the way that humans operate. If we take control of our own destiny, and that goes to just printing a dang coffee cup, right? I need a bottle opener. Boop, print. I'm going to do it myself. I need to fix something and do it myself. I think that that's kind of what I want to see happen, and it's what I espouse, and what the book is all about is look, Sharon asked, so what's your background in this? I'm like, nothing that relates to anything I'm doing right now. So I think to answer your question, there could be lawsuits, there could be things like that, but who are they going to sue? They're going to sue all the dads that did something or moms that did something for their kids. When they do that, that'll be front page on my website and a lot of other websites. That'll be actually bad press for them. So
on that note, what we're going to do, and Terry's going to be following up, Mick has books. Thank you to Dolly's, who's here tonight, to provide books locally, supporting our local Park City Dolly's, and Mick will be signing books and selling books. In addition to that, I haven't really talked about Fire Films. Fire Films is close to my heart. We support world-changing documentaries like what Mick is working on. And for $100 a year, you get 15 documentaries from us that we consider to be really, really important for the world to know about. So if you're interested, you can either go to futureinreview.com and click on Join Fire Films, or find us outside and be part of supporting world-changing documentaries.
Who asked the question about how do you get the word out? Fire Film supported an initiative around, I know how many hands are going to go up here. How many people have 1 or 2 degrees separation from Alzheimer's or dementia? Yeah, it's a massive, massive thing. Statistics, just search it when you go home. Music is a massive source of therapy for people with Alzheimer's or dementia. And it essentially is, in many ways, a magic pill that if my grandmother, who passed from Alzheimer's, who was a piano player and was very Irish, Mary McCarthy, had I known this, I would have played My Irish Eyes Are Smiling, When Your Irish Eyes Are Smiling. it has the ability to be a magic pill that brings them back to a point of lucidity to actually be able to communicate. And if you have a loved one with dementia, then you pray for that moment of just like them to recognize you or have a couple minutes of conversation with them. Fire film, there's a film that I was exposed to through Fire Films called Alive Inside by Michael, what's Michael's last name?
Michael Rosetta Bennett.
And if anyone's out here, it's a great film, and that's a great way to get the word out. So watch the kinds of things that they're doing. We have a whole initiative that we're doing around that right now. I didn't even tell you about that. But we have a whole initiative that we're doing around that right now. And they started to go around and show this, and they did it in Redwood City. And now all of the surrounding kind of Alzheimer's dementia hospitals in that area are using musical therapy. So it's a matter of just tapping and publicizing and using the power of the pen, which is now the power of the click, just to get the word out about things that are doing things like that. So I totally...
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Mick.
Thank you, Terry from Park City. Thank you, Eccles Center. Thank you for all of you for coming tonight.